Alright, so we are going to set up lives and score, and we're going to do that with a control object. So the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to create the control object as one of our objects. It's going to be called obj control. We create a new object called obj control. Obj control is not going to have a sprite. I said that this is this is the first time that we've done that. We do not have a sprite because this object is doing only stuff behind the scenes. Because it's only doing stuff behind the scenes, we don't need a sprite. So we're now going to add the create event so that we can set up our player. So what I need to do is assign a couple of global variables. So I'm going to grab this block here that is set global variable. And I'm only grabbing one block. I'm not going to grab two blocks because I can actually, with one block, set multiple global variables. Because I can click the plus to add a second global variable. So I'm going to name my first variable player capital score. Okay. And I'm going to leave the value as 0. The reason why I'm doing player score is because score is its own global variable already. And I don't want to borrow that one. I want to use a new one called player score. And I'm going to do the same thing for this one, player underscore, or I'm sorry, capital lives. Yep, I'm using this one. I'm going to change the value to 3 because we're going to start with 3 lives. So this is just setting up the global variables so that we have them for later use. Player score, player lives. At this point, we're now going to transition to drawing the lives, or drawing both the score and the lives on screen. I'm going to do score first because score is much easier to do. We're just putting text on the screen. We've done that before. The difference is we're going to create a font first that we're going to use to put the text on the screen. Because the font will be more interesting than the basic font that we have. So I'm going to add a new font. And I'm just going to call it FNT Bricks, because it's my font for the game. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not going to use the default Arial font. I'm going to use a new font called Bauhaus 93 because I think it's very interesting. I like the way it looks. Also, I'm not going to use the base size. I'm going to change the size to 22. Now you can click the arrows to move up and down on the size. Excuse me. Or you can select 12 and type 22 in its place. Either way, if you hit enter, you'll get a preview of what that looks like in your window. So we're choosing Bauhaus 93 and then just changing the size to 22. Those are the only things I'm changing in this window. That's because those are really the only things that I care about for this font. I can close this window or I can leave it open. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the control object. And I'm going to add the draw event. So I click add event, mouse over draw, and select draw. Now, when we did this last time, we used an object that already had a sprite that needed to be drawn. And I think I mentioned that whenever you use the draw event in GameMaker, if your object has a sprite, the first thing you have to do is add a draw self. Because as soon as you use the draw event, it no longer will draw the sprite on its own. You have to tell it to draw the sprite. But because the control object does not have a sprite, we don't need to worry about that. We can go straight to drawing the text. Before we draw the text, though, we want to set our font. So I'm going to scroll down and find Set Font. It's the one that has the two T's. Drag that across. Okay, the font, we're just going to choose the font that we just had, FNT Bricks. That's why we set it up, so that we could use it. Right? So the Set Font block, you have to create a new font in your resources before you can actually set the font. You can't just set any font you want that way. You have to set up the font in your resources, then you can set the font in the draw event. Okay? Now I'm going to draw my value, just like I did last time. My caption, well, score. My value, player score. I'm going to leave X and Y at 0, 0, because I still want to draw it up in the upper left corner. That's what we said. It's just going to look different because it's now going to have a different font that's going to look better. So now, just like any other object, I need to go and I need to add the control object to the room. So I'm going to double click on the room. I'm going to click and drag a control object. You'll notice that instead of a sprite, you're getting a little gray circle with a question mark. That's because there's no sprite. Okay? But that lets you know that there is an object there. It just doesn't have a sprite. So you can put it anywhere you want in the room because it doesn't matter. It's going to draw the score where we told it to draw the score. Right? I just put it in the upper corner to know where it is at all times. So now if I click run, at this point the only thing that's going to be different should be the score. Right? So we should see the score. It's not going to update yet because we haven't done anything updating the score. That's what happened. Oh, I know what happened. I forgot about the fact that, let's go to OBJ control. So, global variables in GameMaker exist in a special object called global, and that's what I forgot. Was that you need to put global dot and then the name of the variable. Okay, it's a quirk of GameMaker that's not like anything else. So we just have to know that if we create a global variable, there's a global object that we have to use to access the variable. So we can't just simply say player score, we have to say global dot player score. So now, when I click run, it should work. There we go. So now the score appears in the upper left corner in the font that I like. I could stand to scoot it over perhaps, but I can do that later also. So that was the easy part, getting score on the screen. The next part is the harder part, and that is getting the lives on the screen in the form of smaller versions of the bat. So, but as I said in my opening, we're going to declare a temporary variable that we're going to use as the x coordinate. We're going to use this expression as the value for the initial x coordinate, and then we're going to repeat for the number of lives, drawing a sprite, scooting over 64. So we're going to do all those things in that order. So first I need to declare a temporary variable. I'm going to scroll up to the top because that's where it's at. It's this one here. It has the var, but it has a little clock above it to say it's a temporary variable. We're going to call it temp capital X. And this is where, in the value, is where we're going to write this expression, just as I see it, with the exception of, instead of just lives, we have to put global dot player lives. So here we go. room underscore width, divide by 2, close my parentheses there, minus, open another set of parentheses, 32, star for multiply, open another set of parentheses, global dot player lives, minus 1, close 2 sets of parentheses. So here we go. Parentheses, room underscore width, divide by 2, close parentheses, minus, open another set of parentheses, 32, star for times, open another set of parentheses, global dot player lives, which is the lives variable, minus 1, close both sets of parentheses. Okay, you should notice that the background of the value box is going to change from red to black when you have an appropriate expression. Parentheses, room width, /2, minus. I don't have any pluses in here. Close parentheses, minus, open parentheses, 32, times, open parentheses, global dot, player lives, minus 1, close both sets of parentheses. Here, I'm going to get it so that we can see the whole thing. There we go. So this is the temporary x variable we're going to start at. Each time we loop through, we're going to draw the sprite, and then we're going to move over 64, change the variable, the temporary variable, by 64. So I'm going to scroll down. I first need a loop. Okay, the loops are going to be gray. Here is the repeat loop. This is the one we want because we know we're repeating a certain number of times, and that's based on lives. So I'm going to bring the repeat loop out, and I'm going to use global dot player lives as my times because I want to repeat it for each life that the player currently has. So if they have 3 lives, it'll repeat 3 times. If they have 2, it'll repeat twice. If they have 1, it'll only do it once. But you'll notice there's an empty. This says empty right here. The deal with that is that we haven't put anything in there. This is like an if statement. We got to put stuff to the right. We're going to draw. So we're going to use this one here. It's called draw sprite transformed, because we already have the sprite, right? It's the bat sprite. We are just not going to draw it as is. We need to transform it. So I'm going to click and drag that to the right. And I'm going to choose the bat sprite at the top. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. There's some stuff we're going to ignore. There's some stuff we're going to use. Okay? We want to draw the bat sprite at a certain location. To the right. That way it's attached. Okay? For x, that's where our temp x comes in. For our y, we're just going to pick I'm going to pick a spot in my room that's below the bat. So like right here, 446 or so. That's the one I'm going to use. So, whoops, wrong thing. Whoops, wrong thing. There we go. So I'm going to go back to the object, to the control object. My y is going to be 446. So I use temp x for x, 446 for y. We're going to scale this in both directions by 75%. So I'm going to do 0.75 for both scale x, scale y. Not going to change rotation. For color, I'm going to click the button here for color. Now I'm not changing the color, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the sprite's alpha by about half. So it'll be like, I think, maybe not 125. Let's see. 256. Yeah, 125 is good enough. We'll do 125. Just type it in. Okay? And then click OK. And you'll see the color change. The change that you see is reflecting the alpha change. So you're doing it kind of transformed. So 125 was the number I used. I just typed it in and I clicked OK. What? That's fine. If it's around 125, it should be okay. And then right after that, we need to add 64 to our variable. So we need to go back up here. I need to get an assigned variable. My tempx, capital X, value is 64. Click the relative box. At this point, if I click run, it should display my lives. And there they are. I got 3. This one is not the life. Right? This one, 64. That's scooting, it's scooting over 64. Okay? So that's it. That's what it should look like.